The road that shouldn't exist, Black Hollow Road, wasn't on most maps, not the good ones, anyway. It was a crooked little line, cutting through the pine-choked outskirts of Duskfield, Maine, a town that itself wasn't much to look at anymore. The textile mill had shut down back in '92, and the few people who stayed behind did so out of habit more than hope. But Black Hollow Road, that was different. Most folks said the road had been there longer than the town, older than the crumbling colonial houses, older even than the sagging white church with its leaning steeple. If you asked the old men who sat outside Merv's diner with their coffee cups trembling in the cold, they'd tell you the same thing. That road don't lead nowhere good. And at the very end of that cracked and winding stretch of asphalt sat a farmhouse. It was the kind of place that made your eyes slip off it, like oil on water. You could be staring right at it, but your brain wanted to look anywhere else. The crooked shutters, the way the roof caved in at the center, the gray boards peeling like skin. Worst of all were the windows, 4 of them in the front, square and black as empty eye sockets. The story went like this: no matter where you stood, no matter how close you got, those windows never showed the world outside. They showed something else. Some said you could see your dead relatives in there, pale faces pressed against the glass, mouthing words you couldn't hear. Others swore they saw shapes that weren't human at all. But people talk, especially in Maine, especially in towns that are dying slow deaths. For 28-year-old Evelyn Marsh, Black Hollow Road was just another backwater curiosity. She had come up from Portland with her camera, her notebook, and the kind of determination that only comes from being told, don't. Her editor at the Portland Gazette had practically laughed in her face when she pitched the piece. A haunted farmhouse. Come on, Evia, you're better than that. But Evelyn knew 2 things. 1, people always read ghost stories. 2, sometimes ghost stories had teeth. The first time she drove down Black Hollow Road, it was near dusk. The trees leaned in close, their shadows stretching across the road like fingers. Her little Subaru rattled over potholes. The air smelled of pine pitch and damp earth. She passed a rusted sign half swallowed by vines. The letters were barely visible, but she squinted and read. Dead end, perfect, she muttered, clicking on the recorder strapped to her dash. Her voice sounded too loud in the small car. Approaching the legendary last house for the Gazette piece. Locals claim she trailed off. The house had appeared between the trees. It wasn't just ruined. It wasn't just abandoned. It watched. That was the only word for it. The windows were black mirrors, swallowing up the reflection of the sunset, the pines, even her car's headlights. Her throat went dry. She slowed to a crawl, gravel crunching beneath her tires. The farmhouse loomed at the end of the road, a corpse of wood and nail, its porch sagging like a mouth that had lost its teeth. Jesus, she whispered. She lifted her camera, snapped a photo. The shutter clicked. The image that blinked on her digital screen made her heart hiccup. In the photo, something stood in the upstairs window. Not clearly, a blur. A smudge of darkness, darker than the shadows themselves. But there, watching. She lowered the camera, eyes snapping to the real window. Empty. Just black glass. Her stomach knotted. She snapped another photo. This time the window was clean, nothing but an empty square. Great, she muttered, forcing a laugh. Starting to see things already. Maybe I need more coffee. Still, she couldn't shake the sensation that someone or something was watching her. She parked the Subaru at the edge of the gravel lot in front of the farmhouse. The engine ticked as it cooled. The woods pressed close around the clearing, as though eager to swallow it all back up. Evelyn slid out of the car. The air was colder here somehow, sharp, her breath puffed white. She raised her camera again. Snap, snap. The farmhouse seemed to lean closer with every shot. Then she noticed something strange. When she reviewed the photos, the trees were in them, the gravel drive, even the peeling boards of the porch. But the windows? Blank, not just dark blank. 4 perfect squares of black, like someone had cut them out with scissors. She lowered the camera slowly. Okay, she whispered. That's weird. The front door hung slightly open, just a crack. Enough to see darkness yawning within. Evelyn's pulse hammered. Every good sense told her to get back in the car, drive to Merv's diner, and order the greasiest cheeseburger she could find. Instead, she reached for her recorder. First impression of the farmhouse, she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. Windows appear not to reflect any outside light. Photographs confirm. Possible explanation, glass treated, or maybe. Her words trailed off, because the recorder wasn't working. The little red light blinked out. The screen went black. Dead battery? She asked aloud, but she'd charged it that morning. She looked back up at the house. The door had opened wider. Only an inch, maybe less, but she hadn't heard it move. Her breath hitched. The camera strap cut into her neck as she tightened her grip. "Hello?" she called, hating the quiver in her voice. No answer, only the creak of branches in the wind. She took a step closer. Gravel shifted beneath her boots. Another step. The porch groaned as she set her foot on it. The wood sagged, old nails screaming faintly. She swallowed hard. Evelyn Marsh, she whispered to herself. Reporter, professional, not a scared little kid. She pushed the door open with the tip of her boot. The hinges moaned. The smell hit her first. Rotten mildew, yes, but beneath it, something metallic, sharp, like blood. She gagged, pulled her scarf over her nose. The entry hall stretched ahead, narrow and dark. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, curling like tongues. Dust lay thick over everything. She lifted her camera. Snap. The flash burst, momentarily painting the hallway in stark white. And in that fraction of a second, she swore she saw a man standing at the end of the hall, tall, shoulders bent, head cocked at an unnatural angle. The flash faded. Empty hall. Her hands trembled so hard the camera strap bit deeper into her neck. She turned, stumbling back onto the porch. The air outside hit her like a gulp of water after drowning. She staggered down the steps, back toward her car. She didn't look back, not once. But later, much later, Evelyn would remember the sound that followed her out of that house, the faint, deliberate sound of footsteps on the stairs. Evelyn didn't breathe easy until the Subaru's headlights caught the peeling red paint of Merv's diner. The building squatted on the corner of Main and Depot, its neon sign buzzing faintly. Eat. That was all. Just eat. It was a wonder the sign hadn't given up the ghost years ago, like everything else in Duskfield. Inside, it smelled of coffee gone bitter from too many hours on the burner and fried onions clinging to grease-caked tiles. A bell chimed as she pushed open the door, and a couple of heads turned. The place was nearly empty. A trucker in a ball cap hunched over pie at the counter. Two old men in flannel jackets occupied a booth by the window, their coffee mugs steaming. And at the far end, polishing the same patch of counter she'd been polishing for probably 30 years, stood Mabel Merv Haggerty herself. Merv wasn't actually a Merv. That had been her husband's name back when he was alive. But he'd gone to the grave sometime in the 80s, and she'd kept both the diner and the name. Everyone called her Merv. She looked up as Evelyn slid onto a cracked vinyl stool. "Kitchen's closed," Merv said flatly, "but I can get you pie. Or coffee. Coffee's fine," Evelyn said. Her voice still carried that tremor she hated, but Merv didn't seem to notice. The mug arrived, thick and chipped, steaming hot. Evelyn wrapped both hands around it, letting the warmth chase out the cold still clinging to her bones. "You're not from around here," Merv said, wiping her hands on a rag. Evelyn shook her head. "Portland, I'm..." She hesitated. Writing a piece, Merv's eyes narrowed. "On the house?" There it was, that tiny shift in the room's air. The two old men in the booth stopped talking, mugs paused halfway to their lips. Even the trucker seemed to lean a little closer. Evelyn forced a shrug. "Local folklore. Haunted places. That sort of thing. You don't want to go poking around Black Hollow Road," one of the old men said. His voice was raspy, like leaves dragged over pavement. "Nothing good comes out of there." His friend nodded. "Ain't been good in 50 years. Evelyn took a sip of coffee, bitter and burnt, and set it down. "So you've been there?" The first old man barked a laugh, short and sharp. "No one with sense goes up there. Not twice, anyhow." Merv cut in before Evelyn could press further. "Eat your pie, Ed. Don't go filling the girl's head with ghost stories." But Evelyn leaned forward. "What happened 50 years ago?" The raspy one set his mug down hard enough to slosh coffee onto the table. "You don't want to know." "I do," Evelyn said. He stared at her, eyes pale and watery, like boiled fish. Finally, he said, "Family lived in that house. The Fletchers, husband, wife, 2 boys. Folks around town knew him. Decent enough people. Then one night, poof, gone. Whole damn lot of them. House was locked up tight, supper still on the table. But no Fletchers." Evelyn frowned. "Disappeared?" "Vanished," Ed said. He jabbed a crooked finger at her. Cops searched high and low. Nothing. Just gone. Merv clucked her tongue. "That's enough, Ed." But he wasn't done. Couple months later, hunters came out of those woods, swearing they heard screaming. Said it was coming from the house. Went up to look, but by the time they got there, nothing. Just them black windows staring back at them. The other old man, silent till now, muttered, "That house takes what it wants." Evelyn's stomach tightened. She jotted notes in her little pad, trying to keep her hands from shaking. Merv snatched up her empty mug. "Don't encourage her, Frank. You think the Gazette's gonna pay her for ghost stories?" She turned to Evelyn. "Take some advice, honey. Go back to Portland. Write about the lobster festival or some damn thing. Leave that place be." But Evelyn wasn't leaving it be. Not after what she'd seen in her photos. "Thanks for the coffee," she said, dropping a couple bucks on the counter. "I'll be careful." Merv just shook her head, muttering under her breath. Something that sounded like, "Careful, don't help you none, not out there." Later that night, Evelyn checked into the only motel in town, the Pine Rest, a squat cinderblock affair with flickering fluorescent lights. Her room smelled faintly of mold and lemon cleaner. She dumped her gear on the bed and powered up her laptop. The photos from earlier blinked onto the screen one by one. There it was, the farmhouse, the peeling boards, the sagging porch, and those windows' 4 black holes. She leaned closer, frowning. In one of the shots, she noticed something new. A smudge in the lower left window. She zoomed in, hard hammering. Not a smudge, a face, or what might have been a face. Blurred, stretched, as though pressed against the glass from the inside. Eyes like pale coins, mouth wide open, too wide. Evelyn sat back hard in the chair. Her phone buzzed, startling her. She fumbled for it. The screen showed no caller ID. She hesitated, then answered, "Hello?" Static hissed, and then, faintly, a voice, "Get out." The line went dead. Evelyn's breath came in short, sharp bursts. She set the phone down, hands trembling. The laptop chimed. Another photo had loaded. She didn't remember taking this one. It showed the farmhouse again, but closer, as if the camera had been only a foot from the window. And inside, clear as day this time, was the same face, staring right at her. The house on Black Hollow Road had always been there, silent, brooding, and half-eaten by weeds. But that night, as Michael and his daughter Claire drove past, he saw a figure standing by the tall grass near the rotting fence. At first, Michael thought it was some drunk from town, but the figure didn't move. It didn't sway, didn't breathe, didn't blink. It only stood there, watching them. What unsettled Michael most wasn't its stillness, it was its shadow. The moonlight stretched across the fields, silver and sharp, but the figure's shadow bent the wrong way, stretching in a direction that defied the light entirely. Michael tightened his grip on the wheel. "Seatbelt on," he muttered. "Don't look outside." Claire's voice trembled. "Daddy, who was that?" He lied. "No one, just a local drunk." But he knew what he had seen. The man's face had been as pale as chalk, skin stretched too thin, like parchment pulled over bone. And where his eyes should have been, there were only pits, empty, dark hollows. The next morning, Michael stopped at the town diner for coffee. Martha, the old waitress with tired eyes, poured his cup and asked casually, "You look like you didn't sleep a wink." Michael hesitated, then lowered his voice. "I saw someone last night, tall, thin, pale face, standing by the Black Hollow fence. Who is he?" The pot trembled in her hands. She nearly spilled, her lips pressed tight. "What time?" "About 10, Michael said. Her eyes clouded, the color draining from her face. "You shouldn't have seen him at all," she whispered. "No one stands near that fence. Not anymore." "The thing you saw, people around here call him the Hollow Man." Michael gave a nervous laugh. "That sounds like a ghost story." Martha shook her head slowly. "I saw him once, 3 years ago. My husband saw him too. For 2 weeks after, he swore the Hollow Man stood outside our bedroom window every night, watching. He didn't last. One morning, I found him swinging in the barn." Michael's stomach turned cold. "You can't be serious." Her eyes said everything. She wasn't joking. That night, when Michael returned home, he found Claire standing by her window, staring out into the yard. He swallowed. "Claire, what are you doing up?" She turned, her small face pale. "I saw him again, Daddy." Michael's pulse thundered. "Who?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "The man, but this time he was closer, right by the fence. And Daddy," her voice broke into a whisper, "he waved at me." The house smelled of old wood and dust, like a place that had been sealed too long, yet never fully abandoned. After Claire's unsettling confession, Michael couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, restless and irritable, he climbed into the attic. The stairs groaned under his weight. The attic door stuck before opening with a reluctant creak, releasing a smell of mildew and mothballs. A thin chain of moonlight cut across the floorboards. Dust hung thick in the air like a storm of tiny ghosts. Michael aimed his flashlight into the gloom. Boxes, crates, furniture draped in yellowing sheets, and in the far corner, a trunk. The trunk was old, iron-banded, its lock rusted away decades ago. Something about it drew him closer, as if the house itself wanted him to open it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, bound in fading twine. Their envelopes were brittle, paper thin with age. He picked up the first. The ink had bled, but the words were still legible. August 17, 1921. He watches the house at night. At first, we thought him a traveler lost on the road, but travelers do not come this far. His face is wrong. His smile never leaves. I fear he has already taken Emma. Though her body lies beside me still, Michael froze. His skin prickled cold. He read another, September 3, 1921. The hollow man does not knock. He does not enter through the door. He waits until you dream, then he finds you. He took father last night. His chair was empty this morning, though the fire still burned. The third letter was worse. October 10, 1921, I begged him. I offered prayer. I offered blood. He only leaned closer, and in his hollow eyes I saw myself, 20 years older, hanging from the rafters. If this is my fate, God forgive me. I will not wait for him to finish. The ink had smudged into a desperate scrawl. Michael dropped the bundle back into the trunk, his hand shaking. His breath gained quick and shallow. And then he noticed something else. On the inside of the trunk lid, carved deep into the wood, were words scratched in jagged letters, DON to look at the windows. Suddenly, a noise from below. Claire's voice, small, fragile, almost a whisper, floating up the stairs. Daddy, he's back. Michael's flashlight shook. He turned toward the attic window, against his better judgment. And in the glass, a pale, grinning face stared back at him from outside. Michael didn't remember running down the attic stairs, only the sensation of cold sweat dripping down his back, his heart hammering so loud it drowned out thought. Claire was waiting for him at the bottom, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide. Daddy, she whispered, he's inside. Michael swallowed hard. No, sweetheart, just a dream. But even as he said it, he heard it, the sound. Not footsteps, not breathing, something worse. A whisper, thin as paper, curling through the plaster walls. At first, it was just one voice indistinct, muttering nonsense. But then another joined, and another. Soon, it sounded as though dozens of people were speaking at once, their whispers snaking through the studs and beams like a living infestation. Claire covered her ears. They're too loud, Daddy. Michael pressed his ear against the wall. He froze. The whispers weren't nonsense. They were names, his name, and Claire's. At dawn, desperate for answers, Michael walked into town and found himself in the tiny, dust-stained library. The librarian, a gray-haired man with a bad limp, glanced up when Michael asked about the house on Black Hollow Road. You staying there? The old man asked, lowering his voice. Don't. Michael leaned across the desk. Tell me why. The librarian hesitated, then fetched a brittle scrapbook from the archives. He opened it with careful fingers, revealing black and white photographs. The first was a family, stern parents and 3 children posed in front of the same farmhouse. The caption read, The Whitakers, 1921. All dead by winter, the librarian murmured. The father was found in the field, throat cut. Mother drowned in the well. 2 of the children hanged themselves in the barn. The third was never found. Michael flipped to the next page. Another photo. A different family. 1954. Same house. He asked. The librarian nodded grimly. Same ending. Michael closed the book, his stomach twisting. You're saying the house does this? The old man's eyes glinted. Not the house, him. The hollow man, Michael whispered. The librarian leaned closer, his voice low and cracked. They say he lives in the walls now, feeds on names. The moment you hear your own spoken back to you, it's already too late. You belong to him. That night, Michael tried not to listen. He tucked Claire in, sat awake with a shotgun across his knees, and told himself the house was only wood and nails. But around midnight, the whispers returned. And this time, they weren't just in the walls. They were in the ceiling, the floorboards, the spaces between his teeth, curling down his throat like smoke. Claire whimpered from her room. And then, clear as a bell, he heard her voice call from the dark hallway outside. Daddy, come play with me. Michael's blood froze, because Claire was still asleep in her bed. Michael didn't breathe for a full 5 seconds. The voice in the hallway, Claire's voice, but not Claire's, hung in the air like a thread pulled tight. Slowly, he lifted the shotgun and crept toward the door. The hall stretched long and dark, shadows pooling thick around the corners. At the far end, near the bathroom, he saw her, Claire, standing very still. But she wasn't right. Her head tilted too far to one side, her limbs stiff as if strung on invisible wires. Her smile stretched wider than any child's smile should. "Daddy," she said again, her voice cracking, broken like a record warped by heat. "Come play with me." Michael's grip tightened on the shotgun. He forced himself forward, step by step. When he reached the bathroom door, she was gone. Only the mirror remained. The bathroom smelled of damp plaster and rust. The mirror above the sink was cracked down the middle, the glass warped in strange, liquid curves, and in its surface, not his reflection. Not Claire's, a man, tall, too thin. His skin pale, stretched tight over his skull. Eyes black and hollow, sucking light instead of reflecting it. His grin showed teeth too sharp, too many. The Hollow Man. Michael stumbled back, choking on terror. But the figure in the mirror didn't move with him, it leaned closer. The glass seemed to bend outward, as though the mirror itself were soft, stretching. The Hollow Man whispered, voice scraping like nails inside his skull. "You brought her here. You opened the door. Now she is mine," Michael roared, swinging the shotgun up. He pulled the trigger. The blast shattered the mirror into a rain of shards, the walls quaking with the echo. When the smoke cleared, only silence remained. But from Claire's bedroom, he heard her scream. He sprinted down the hall, threw open the door, and froze. Every shard of the shattered mirror was there, floating in the air, suspended like stars. Each fragment showed Claire, not as she was, but as she would be, her body pale, hanging from a noose in the barn, her eyes swollen, her lips blue. And in every shard, the Hollow Man stood behind her, smiling. Claire screamed again, clutching her stuffed rabbit to her chest. "Daddy, make him stop looking at me." Michael's knees buckled. His mind fought against collapse. He gathered her in his arms, whispering, "I won't let him take you. I swear it. I won't." But deep in his skull, another whisper laughed. "You already have." The Whitaker barn loomed at the edge of the property, black against the pale Maine moonlight. Michael had avoided it for weeks, ever since he first arrived. Something about it repelled him, a cold that reached into his bones even on the warmest nights. But now, Claire had begun whispering in her sleep. Not her own words, his promises. "I won't let him take you. I won't let him take you." Repeating over and over, her lips moving in perfect mimicry as though the Hollow Man had wound her like a doll. And every time she whispered, the barn doors creaked open just a little wider. That night, unable to bear it any longer, Michael carried a lantern across the brittle grass. The barn doors were swollen with age, their wood gray and splintered. Rusted chains rattled as he forced them apart. The smell hit him first stale hay, mold, and something worse, the copper tang of old blood. The lantern light revealed ropes dangling from the rafters, dozens of them, swaying gently though the air was still. Each noose seemed tied for a neck too small. Children's necks. Michael gagged, pressing his hand to his mouth. He wanted to leave, to run, but the sound stopped him. Laughter. Thin, high-pitched, echoing in the rafters. Not joyous laughter, something broken, gasping, caught between giggles and sobs. He raised the lantern and his throat went dry. Shapes stirred in the shadows, children, pale, translucent, their eyes black pits. Their heads lolled unnaturally, as though the rope still pulled at them. Some crawled across the beams like insects, their bones bending wrong. Others shuffled closer on broken legs, whispering his name. "Michael, Michael." The lantern sputtered. In its failing light, he saw the Hollow Man standing among them, towering, his hands resting gently on the shoulders of two of the ghostly children as if they were his own. Michael's grip tightened on the lantern handle. His voice cracked as he shouted into the dark, "Take me. Leave her alone." The Hollow Man tilted his head, the grin widened, and the nooses began to drop, one by one, swaying just above Michael's head. Each rope tightened on nothing, pulling upward, until he realized they weren't empty. Each noose now held a version of Claire, dozens of them. Some young, some older, some twisted and dead-eyed. Every possible future of his daughter strangling in unison, their feet twitching above the straw. Michael collapsed to his knees, clutching his skull. No, no, no. The Hollow Man leaned close, his voice like knives scraping on glass. She is mine in every ending. The morning after the barn, Michael didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with his shotgun across his lap, watching Claire draw pictures on yellowed paper she'd found in one of the cupboards. The drawings weren't hers, at least, not entirely. Her hand moved in jerks, strokes too sharp for a child's grip, and what formed on the page was a face. The Hollow Man, dozens of times, over and over, until the paper tore. "Claire," Michael whispered, his voice shaking. "Where did you see him?" She didn't answer, just kept drawing. That evening, desperate for answers, Michael tore apart the farmhouse. He ripped open floorboards, pried into the crawl space, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. And in the attic, under a rotted trunk filled with moth-eaten dresses, he found it, a leather-bound journal, its pages warped and brown with water damage. The name scratched into the cover with a nail read, Sarah Whitaker, 1892. He opened it carefully. The handwriting inside slanted with haste, every page filled with ink blots, stains, and frantic scratches. He read by lantern light, heart hammering. August 3rd, 1892. "We should never have come to this place. The land is poisoned. The soil bears no crops. The animals turn sickly." Yet he insisted. Samuel said the price was too good, that the Hollow Road was only a name. But it is not only a name. It is a warning. August 15th, 1892. The children do not sleep. They wake screaming of a tall man with black eyes who stands at the edge of their beds. Samuel says it is their imagination. But I have seen him too, reflected in the glass when no one stood behind me. September 2nd, 1892. They hanged the boy. Dear God, they hanged him. He wandered into the barn at night, and they found him swinging by the rafters come morning. They say it was an accident. But the rope was tied too perfectly for a child's hands. The townsfolk whisper. They call him the Hollow Man. September 30th, 1892. The mirror is his door. He watches from the other side. The children are not safe. I am not safe. Samuel will not listen. If you read this, burn the glass. Burn it all, before he takes you too. Michael shut the book, his hands trembling, his mind spun with fragments of her terror. The Hollow Man wasn't just haunting them. He had been here for over a century, feeding, waiting. And Sarah Whitaker hadn't escaped. Her last entry was a smear of ink, lines gouged so hard into the page the paper tore. He wants the children, always the children. Claire's voice drifted from behind him, soft, sing-song. "Daddy?" He turned, and his blood froze. She was holding a shard of broken glass, her reflection in it smiling wider than she was. The shard of glass gleamed in Claire's hand, trembling faintly as if alive. Michael lunged forward, terrified she might cut herself. "Claire, drop it!" He barked, his voice harsher than he intended. She blinked, startled, then slowly turned the shard toward him. "Daddy," she whispered. "He says you can't stop him." Michael froze. "Who?" Her lips curved into a thin, unnatural smile. "The man in the glass, we were playing. He taught me a game." Michael's throat went dry. He took the shard carefully, wrapped it in a towel, and shoved it into a drawer. But Claire's eyes never left it. That night, he made the mistake of asking her about the game. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her stuffed rabbit pressed to her chest, her eyes distant. "He calls it the reflection game," she said softly. "You stand in front of a mirror, you say your name, then he says it back. If you keep playing, he'll tell you secrets." Michael's skin prickled. What kind of secrets? She leaned close, whispering into his ear, "Like how you're going to die." Sleep abandoned him. Michael barricaded the mirrors, draping them with sheets, covering every reflective surface in the house. But in the dark hours before dawn, he woke to the sound of Claire giggling in the bathroom. He stumbled toward the noise. The door was cracked open, faint lamplight glowing inside. Claire stood before the covered mirror, the sheet pulled half away. Her reflection didn't move with her. She lifted her arm. The reflection stayed still. Then, slowly, the reflection raised its arm on its own. Michael's heart seized. The reflection smiled, even though Claire wasn't, and it whispered his name, Michael. He lunged forward, tearing Claire away, yanking the sheet back over the mirror. She screamed and kicked, shrieking, "You ruined the game. He'll be mad at you now." Michael held her tight, fighting panic, whispering, "No one's taking you, Claire. Not him. Not anyone." But deep in the covered glass, he swore he heard the Hollow Man laugh, a low, hungry chuckle that rattled the walls. The next day, the journal weighed heavy in his pocket. Sarah Whitaker had warned him, "Burn the glass." Michael grabbed the drawer where he'd hidden the shard. But when he opened it, the towel was gone. The shard was gone, and Claire's voice drifted from upstairs, singing in a tune he didn't recognize. Round and round, the circle spins. One will lose, and one will win. If Daddy breaks the mirror's frame, the Hollow Man will know his name. Michael hadn't slept in 2 days. His skin itched. His thoughts rattled like loose stones in a tin can. Every creak of the house felt alive. Every shadow stretched too long. But it was the mirrors that haunted him. Even covered, they seemed to breathe. The fabric over them bulged and twitched as though something beneath pressed against it, straining to come out. And Claire. Claire was slipping away. Her once bright eyes had grown hollow, her cheeks sallow. She hardly ate, hardly spoke, except when she was alone with the reflections. Michael had caught her more than once whispering to the bathroom mirror, the sheet pulled just enough to let her see. "Stop it," he shouted one night, ripping the cloth fully down and dragging her away. Her reflection had lingered, even after she was gone. That night, he made his decision. The journal's warning echoed: burn the glass, break the ties, end the game before it ends you. So Michael carried every mirror, every shard, every reflective surface he could find into the yard. He doused them with kerosene, his hands shaking. Claire stood at the window, watching with eyes that weren't entirely hers anymore. He struck a match. The fire roared to life, devouring the mirrors one by one. But the flames didn't reflect in them. Instead, faces screamed back at him, hundreds of them, pale and stretched, mouths open in eternal horror. They pressed against the glass, palms slamming as though trapped behind ice, and in every single reflection, he saw Claire, dying, over and over again. The fire collapsed the glass into molten puddles. Michael staggered back, tears streaming, the smell of scorched metal and burning paint choking him. For a moment, silence. Then laughter, not from the fire, not from the house. From inside him, a voice curling in his skull like smoke. "You think you've won. Every flame is just another doorway." Michael dropped to his knees, clutching his head. He saw visions. Claire standing in the barn with the nooses. Claire in the mirror smiling with black eyes. Claire walking hand in hand with the Hollow Man down a road made of broken glass. The firelight danced across the yard, and in its glow, he saw something impossible. The house itself had a reflection. Across the road, where no building stood, its twin shimmered in the night air, warped and jagged, as though made entirely of cracked mirrors. And in its windows, Claire waved at him, her lips mouthing words he couldn't hear. Michael screamed her name. The Hollow Man's reply came back, soft, cruel, inevitable. "This is the last reflection. The game ends when you follow her inside." Michael stumbled across the road, his boots crunching gravel, his lungs burning with smoke. The impossible stood before him, a house made entirely of fractured mirrors, shimmering in the moonlight. It wasn't a reflection, it was real. Every surface bent and warped, capturing his face, his fear, his soul 1,000 times over. And in every shard, Claire smiled. She stood inside the doorway of the glass house, beckoning him with pale hands. "Come home, Michael," she whispered, her voice echoing in his skull. He knew it wasn't her, and yet it was. The Hollow Man loomed just beyond, his figure stitched together from reflections, a tall silhouette with no face of its own. Its mask shifted with every glance, sometimes Michael's face, sometimes Claire's, sometimes strangers screaming silently. Michael stepped forward, glass crunching under his boots. The door opened. Inside, the house stretched on forever, endless corridors of mirrors, every wall reflecting him until he was swallowed by a million versions of himself, each one twisted differently, some with hollow eyes, some grinning too wide, some already dead. And all of them whispered in unison, "You chose this." Claire appeared in the center of the labyrinth, her dress fluttering like smoke. She reached out, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Save me," she begged, "before he takes me forever." The Hollow Man's laughter fractured through the mirrors like breaking glass. Michael clutched the kerosene can in one hand, the lighter in the other. His last weapon, his last choice. He could run to her, or he could burn it all down. He struck the lighter. Flame roared to life, trembling in his hand. "Claire," he whispered, his throat raw. For a moment, her face softened, real, human, terrified. Then the Hollow Man's shadow fell over her, and her reflection warped, her smile stretching too wide, her eyes black voids. Michael screamed and hurled the flame. The house erupted in fire. Every mirror screamed as though alive, shattering into clouds of molten shards. The reflections burned, one by one, hundreds of trapped souls howling, fading into smoke. The corridors collapsed inward. The hollow man twisting in agony, its faceless head splitting into 1,000 broken pieces. And Claire, her reflection reached for him, lips moving. "Thank you." Then she was gone. Michael stumbled into the night, the glass house collapsing behind him in a storm of flame and shrapnel. His arms were cut, his body broken, but he crawled into the dirt road and watched until the last of it was gone. When the fire died, nothing remained. No house, no mirrors, only silence. Days later, the townsfolk of Black Hollow found him wandering the road, half mad, whispering her name. He never spoke of what happened in the house again, but sometimes when the moonlight hit the windows just right, he swore he still saw her reflection waving back.